I got a great question about how to create a giant painting recently, and it got me thinking about all of the different ways that we can do that as artists. So I think each artist has to really figure out their own process and what works for their creative process. But I'll definitely talk about some of the various ways that have worked for me. So I think the first giant painting that I created, what I basically did is I did like a thumbnail and an intuitive painting, which I'll include a link to a video in the description that talks about this whole idea of doing intuitive paintings. And that just gave me like the basic kind of idea for the painting, but actually it was very general. And then I just got a giant canvas. It was like 4 feet by 9 feet, and it was on an aluminum stretcher, so it was fairly sturdy. I really got like a professional one so that it would stay flat. Like otherwise sometimes they can start to warp when they're like that big, and one corner will kind of like pull off the wall and stuff like that. So yeah, I got like a really good canvas and just stretched it and kind of started with these like loose gestural strokes, kind of recreating the intuitive painting that I had done, but blowing it up giant size. So I was using like big brushes, and I'll include a link to that as well, to where you can get, you know, big synthetic brushes like the ones I was using. And yeah, just basically map in, say, like practically 5 to 7 big color shapes, like big bodies of color. And for me, like right away, I can start to visualize how the painting's gonna look when I do that. And it's actually the most exciting part of the process because my mind fills in all the blanks and I'm like, oh, it's gonna be amazing. Of course, then it hits the middle phase of the process and it gets much more difficult. And at that point, I need to basically supplement like my imagination and the intuitive painting that kind of created the idea, the vision for the idea, and supplement it with like every tool that we have available to us as artists. So doing like photo shoots with like myself, my friends, and maybe some models, maybe hiring some live models and working from life, taking like photos of everything, maybe doing some Google searches and finding like supplementary photos, making sure that if I'm using photos from Google, or, you know, Pinterest can be another good place to look, and maybe we could find higher resolution images sometimes on Pinterest, but making sure that if I'm using these photos from other sources like Google or Pinterest, knowing that they're not my photos, that I'm changing it a little bit as I go, so that it's not like kind of a copyright infringement type of a situation. And then the one that was really useful to me at a certain phase was to discover that I could also make like little plasticine models of the kind of things that I was painting, and that was really useful because then, for example, I was painting this painting and it was the first really big painting that I had ever done where I had started from like pure imagination. And it had this sort of battle scene in it, and I was also looking at like work by other artists. That's another really useful tool. So I was referencing lots of like Renaissance battle scenes and things like that, and I had this battle scene going on among these like giant flowers, and it was really hard to figure out. They were contemporary figures, though. It was like my friends on the horses and stuff, and it was hard to figure out the cast shadows on the ground and the lighting because I didn't always have like, you know, horses and good lighting, you know. So I was actually able to get like some little kid toy horses from like a kid's toy store and make little plasticine figures of like, you know, a girl sitting with a pink shirt and blue pants or whatever, you know, kind of blobs, like, and then I could take a light source and light these little plasticine models the same as my light source in my painting was, and that would give me really good cast shadows on the ground and also like a good color for the shadow side of the clothing. Like if it was a pink shirt and blue pants, you know, I could get the colors for that, and then I could reference that like as well with like filling in the details with photo, you know, with photo shoots with my friends and things like that. And some artists these days too are also using, you know, 3D modeling programs like Blender and Nomad, and so that's another really good tool. So we just have so many tools. We kind of just have to figure out what tools like work for us to fill in the blanks and make it be, you know, make it possible to bring our, you know, our initial vision, which starts out very gesturally, into the, you know, into the resolution of the final painting. And then these two paintings that I have on the wall behind me, one thing that's interesting kind of about what I'm doing with in these cases is that I've actually stuck, like I've stapled the canvas just directly onto the wall. And actually I'm going to keep it like that for these paintings. I kind of like the fragility of the canvas not over the stretcher in these cases, but I do know artists too that will like staple the canvas to the wall, you know, like you see with this one, and then they'll just kind of work, you know, and that way they'll be able to stretch the canvas at the end and kind of work out the exact cropping and the composition that way. So that could also be really good if you don't want to like get a giant stretcher because you're not totally sure about the dimensions that the final piece will be. Yeah, that can be really good. Just make sure to leave like 6 inches all the way around for like stretching the canvas, you know. And I would say draw the border, you know, maybe get some charcoal or whatever and just draw the line of the border, you know, within the frame of your canvas, you know, 6 inches in from the edge so that you don't overshoot that, because it does take quite a bit of canvas to wrap it around, say, a gallery depth stretcher, and you know, and staple it onto the back and everything like that. And yeah, and so these 2 paintings that you see behind me right now, they are actually, in this case, actually blown up versions of smaller paintings. Like for me personally, I've discovered that I work sort of intuitively, so the painting kind of takes form as I'm painting actually. And when I used to try to like create really finished studies, I would just be like creating the study forever and I would never move to the finished painting. So I did these smaller versions of these paintings thinking it was the finished painting. It really was, you know, at the time. And I kind of worked intuitively on them and I let it sort of evolve as I was, you know, creating the painting. I'll include some painting process shots, but yeah, just how much they change like over the course of me creating them. And so I have to kind of follow my epiphanies and follow my instincts on the paintings. But it turned out with these 2 paintings, and the first one, this one was 16 by 20, and this one, the center frame, the center canvas was 16 by 20, and the 2 side canvases were 10 by 20. I ended up, you know, I've really liked these paintings, and so just recently I thought, well, what if I start like a big version of these 2 paintings, but just a little bit different. Like this one now has this border around it, which I'm kind of like really enjoying. And this one is now it's a triptych on canvas, but it's just not got a stretcher. So it kind of has this scroll-like feel. Something about that seems really interesting to me. But you can kind of see in the paintings, especially the one to my right, that as I block in the first initial shapes, like it's really just big, giant masses of color, and I'll go into the details, you know, more and more and more like later as I go. But other artists, they do like really refined studies and, you know, refined sketches of detailed areas, you know, to kind of work out all the details before they move to the final painting. So we really do have to discover our own creative process, come to understand like what works for us. And so really it just is a process of experimentation, just like trying things out. And if it's your first time working big, you know, just whatever feels right to you, but most importantly, start the big one, you know, and then see it all the way through to the end. Like this painting that I was talking about with the flowers and the battle scene, it actually took me like 3 years to complete, because when I started the painting, I was a person who couldn't paint a painting like that, but I just struggled my way through it all the way to the end. And then by the end of it, I was a person who could paint a painting like that. And for like, I was so happy, like this painting has, you know, gone on to like be the centerpiece for my show and, you know, be featured in like magazines, and it eventually sold and everything like that. And, you know, so that all means like so much to me. But what really means the most to me is this internal transformation where I started out as a person who couldn't paint a painting like this, and by the end I was a person who could. And we can really only get there by doing it. So just whatever feels right to you, you know, whether it's doing some studies first or whether it's kind of doing a thumbnail and moving straight to the giant finished painting. Yeah, do whatever it takes and get started on the big one, and then just see what it takes to bring it to the finish. And you'll learn so much in doing it. And yeah, leave a comment below to share about your experience painting giant paintings and what you've discovered about your own creative process when you're doing big paintings.